everybody, Keith, East Village Wine Geek here, in a little bit of a new location today. We're out in Vino, our restaurant and wine bar. Today I want to talk about rosé. Last week, our boy in New York City of the New York Times, Eric Asimov, did a wonderful article about rosé. He talked about how rosé has and can have a complexity to it. So I want to talk about rosé, how rosé is made, and then I'm going to talk about this weird thing called White Zinfandel. I want to start with a little bit of history here. It's not the most intense, most complex story, but rosé kind of started in the Champagne region of France. What they were trying to do was make white wine from red wine grapes to bring some complexity. They were actually competing with Burgundy. It's a whole completely different story. And when they made this wine, it was pinkish in color, and they called it something that translates from French into English, the eye of the partridge. Again, as I've said before, I'm very bad at pronouncing French, so my boy Andrew is about to get nice with how to say that term.
Okay, ready? Go.
Œil de perdrix.
Thank you, Andrew. Wonderful. You know what's really weird about this term that Andrew so wonderfully just pronounced?
Perdrix.
The wine looked like the eye of a partridge, but while it was dying. How crazy is that? So that term is the eye of a partridge in the throes of death. Crazy, love it, awesome. At some point, this wine sort of fell out of fashion in the Champagne region because they started making this bubbly wine called Champagne. But it gained a lot of popularity in Switzerland of all places, and now there's actually appellations in Switzerland that are named this eye of the partridge.
Perdrix.
That's a little history about rosé. How is rosé made? There's a few ways rosé is made, but there's two ways that I think are prevalent and that we should all understand. The first one is a term called salmon-y. Andrew, can you pronounce that for me really quick?
Saignée.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, buddy. It basically means to bleed or bled. When a wine is being made, you take grapes, you put it into a vat, you enter yeast into that situation, and the wine starts fermenting and macerating. So as the wine is being made, that's called fermentation. And while the fermentation is happening, something called maceration is happening too, where the juice of the grapes is extracting pigments from the skins of the grapes. And that's how you make red wine, white wine, that's how it gains its color. What they'll do is, halfway through the fermentation process, they'll release some free-run juice and put it into a separate area. Free-run juice is basically the juice that comes off the skins without having to be pressed. And that juice is usually very pink or clear, depending on the grapes that you use. It has a certain levels of pink and salmon and red.
Fuchsia!
And then what they'll do is they'll take that and ferment that separately as a rosé. What that does also is the wine that they're making, the red wine they're actually making, they've drawn off some of that juice. So the red wine is going to have a little more concentration of flavor and more tannin structure because there's less moisture in contact with the wine. Fun. The second most popular way of making rosé is something called short maceration.
No, Andrew, it's cool. I have this one down. Ready? Short maceration. Thank you.
Short maceration means they're basically just making a wine like anybody else makes a wine, but they're only allowing the juice to stay in contact with the skins for a very short amount of time. But when doing that, you get a little more flavor, you get a little more punch in your rosé. White Zinfandel. Okay, let me tell you a story. There's a winemaker in California called Beringer. And there's a guy named Bob Trinchero. And in the 1970s, he was making Zinfandel because Beringer was very popular with Zinfandel. That's kind of how they made their name. It was before the 80s when you had all the cult Zins and the cult cabs and stuff like that. What he would do is he was trying to get more concentration in his Zinfandel. So he would actually do a salmon-y type thing where he would draw some free-run juice off, make it into a rosé, and then, you know, make the Zinfandel a little more extracted. So hence the American style of Zinfandel. became really extracted and high alcohol contents and all that stuff. And they had this rosé and it was pretty popular. They called it White Cabernet, which is very weird. Okay, so you have rosé being made from Zinfandel. They're calling it White Cabernet. They're making a very extracted Zinfandel. Everything's all fun and games. And then 1975 comes around, the year of my birth. In 1975, after they did the free run juice, they had this rosé happening, and it was fermenting just like they do with sun yeast. It's fermenting. Something called stuck fermentation happened. What is stuck fermentation? Basically, what happens is yeast is turning juice into wine. At a certain alcohol level, the yeast dies, becomes lees, floats to the top. They scrape that off and they throw that away, or they put it into the vineyard for fertilizer and stuff like that. Sometimes the yeast will die before the alcohol level gets to the point where they're supposed to die. And that's called stuck fermentation. Because what's happening is, it's fermenting, the yeast dies before they need to die, and that means no more wine, no more alcohol is being made. So this guy, Bob, we'll call him Bob, he goes over, a couple weeks later, he goes to this barrel and he tastes this thing. He sees there's stuck fermentation, he's like, ah. He tastes it and he's like, oh, this is nice and sweet. See, the rosés they were making were very dry. This one was nice and sweet. And so he's like, you know what? Why don't we bottle this and see what if the people like it? Sure enough, the market loved it. They went crazy with it, and it became White Zinfandel. And around this time, this is when the blush wine term came about, which is a term pretty much coined by American wine industry to describe the wine that is White Zinfandel.
Can I get you a glass of wine?
Do you have any blush?
White Zinfandel is a very sweet, quaffing, pinkish blush rosé wine. It's not complex. If you want to try a rosé that has complexity, White Zinfandel won't give it to you. So that's rosé. When you're in the park, when you're at a barbecue and you're drinking this beautiful salmon-colored pink wine, and you actually detect some complexity and you're like, wow, this is really nice. Now you know how rosé is made. There's two ways of making it, a little bit of history, and now you can enjoy it knowing exactly what's going on. This is the East Village Wine Geek coming to you live from Invino, 215 East 4th Street, 212-539-1011. We do brunch. See ya.